Merry Chrysler, everyone. It is time for the Christmas season to begin with our first Christmas character. We have Buon Natale Grazioso Sayaka, also known as just Santa Sayaka or the White Santa Sayaka. And this is one of the most solid units we've seen so far. Is she overpowered? Maybe not quite, but just extremely solid. Let's talk about it. So she's an aqua buffer, and her special deal is that when she uses her skill, she applies a unique buff to everyone in the party, which increases speed, increases damage dealt when targeting elemental weakness, and when SP is 3 or higher and they do an attack at that point, then it will also increase their damage by a little bit. Now, even though this is a unique buff, the question that I was asking myself is, what if this wasn't a unique buff and it instead was just 3 separate buffs? It would basically be the same. There's not really that much reason for this to be just a single buff, but I guess it makes sure that there's not too many icons on the buff bar and you see just one icon and you know that one icon is 3 different things. But that's basically what this is. It's just a selection of other buffs that are packed into one. And they're all very simple buffs, some speed, some damage, and some more damage. But this last bit of damage is dependent on you having at least 3 SP or higher. Well, don't worry, in case you want more SP, then Santa Sayaka has got you covered. She'll give you more SP. And how she does that is the following, with her ability. Now, she can get up to 8 magic stacks, and she gains a magic stacks whenever anyone or she uses their skill. Right? So you spend a skill point to use a skill on anyone, and then she gains 1 magic. However, then when she reaches 8 magic, she will consume all of that and do a follow-up attack, which hits every single enemy. She goes Beyblade mode for a second, and she will then grant everyone 2 extra SP. Awesome. So you're basically you're investing some SP, and then you get a rebate of 2 SP for every 8 skill points used. So it's not like she generates bonus MP, but rather she gives you like a rebate, like I said, like she gives you some back, right? Anyway, the point is also that this follow-up attack also gives her some action advance, but that's not really that important. The important part really is that you get extra SP, which makes it then easier to have the special buff that she applies actually give you that bonus damage that requires you to be at 3 SP or higher. That's basically the entire idea. And her special, also nothing too crazy, it's just a buff that increases attack, increases damage done, and then also applies an additional attack up that actually gets stronger every time you use the special and goes all the way up to 15% extra attack. Now, the way that this scales with the special level is that the initial attack and damage dealt up, that increases by special level, but the bonus attack that stacks every time you use the special, that is actually the same at all levels, which is, I guess it doesn't make much of a difference after all. But yeah, so basically you just have a bunch of buffs to damage, to attack, you get some bonus SP, you get some bonus speed, you get the elemental weakness bonus. It's just a very wide spread of different types of buffs, and I think it's the most widespread of buffs out of any buffer out there. The only thing she doesn't do is action advance to the team. Outside of that, she does basically everything. Oh, and I guess she doesn't do MP restoration. Yeah, I guess she also doesn't do that. But apart from that, she does basically everything. Now, what else do we have? We have her support ability. Support ability just increases all allies' damage, and then whenever someone on the party uses a skill, also does a stacking attack buff. This is actually very interesting, because as far as support abilities go, usually it's just a bunch of speed or some small bonus to the character that equips the support ability. It's actually very rare that a support ability applies to more than just the equipping unit, because this is a party-wide buff that you equip to someone as a support Kyoku. The only other one that comes to mind is Ui's support Kyoku, because Ui's support Kyoku buffs the entire party's follow-up attack and counterattack damage. Now, is this strong? Yes, it's actually extremely strong, because, like I said, usually you don't actually get something that increases the output, like how good a buffer is, like how much buff they provide to the team. Usually that's not something you get as a support Kyoku. The only one that comes to mind is Tsuruno, because Tsuruno support Kyoku increases the strength of all buffs, which, yes, does make buffs stronger. But now here's a second support Kyoku that also just gives you stronger buffs. And because of that, I would say this is up there with Tsuruno as the best support Kyoku. So even if you don't want to actually field Santa Sayaka on the field, you can use her as a support Kyoku for any of your buffers, and they're going to be very happy about that. Then we also have her EX, which I'm not so sure I'm going to use it. So what it does is, on battle skill use, grants 5 MP. And then when at least one ally has Yuletide Gleam, which is the special unique buff that you get from using her skill, increases speed, and you get more speed the more allies have it, which Hopefully every ally has this at all times, which means you would have a 10% speed bonus at all times, but only for yourself, only for Santa Sayaka. Is this good? It's alright, but the thing is, between all of the other crystals, you could want to use it over maybe the 8 speed or maybe over the guard. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not the greatest one either. So you compare, for example, to the one that gives 8 speed, right? So you have the other crystals gives 8 speed. Well, 10% speed is more than 8 speed because she has 121 base speed, so it's actually 12 speed, right? It's better than that. But then you look at the MP part of this, and you can compare that to the MP percent crystallis. So it does sound like it is more than 10% because a skill is 30 and this gives extra 5, right? But the 10% from the other crystals would only be 3, so it's better than that, right? So it sounds like it's better than the MP percent, it's better than the speed, and you have both at once. But you can also just have multiple of these effects, so you can have both the EX and the MP percent crystals and the speed. But you might also want to have the guard, so you could have, instead of the speed crystals, you can put the guard. So as I'm trying to get across, you can sort of mix and match all of those different crystals around, but you don't have to use the EX because you can get some of those effects from regular crystals already. So let's say you already have the orange rarity MP, you already have the orange rarity speed, and then you can just put a guard on there and you don't need to have the EX, and you can just play without the EX, it's fine. But if you have the EX, you can swap it in there with any of the other crystals that you would otherwise be using, and it's going to work pretty well alongside all these other ones. So I would say it's a pretty balanced EX. It's a very balanced EX is what I'm trying to get at. So what else do we have? Well, she has an Ascension 2, of course, and the Ascension 2 is just the special unique buff that she provides now also does an additional 30% element weakness damage bonus, and she also gets 10% more speed, which actually makes her really, really fast, by the way. She's actually extremely fast now with all of those speed buffs, specifically if you put both the speed crystals and her EX on there, she's going zoom really, really fast. So that can help you out if you want to just generally have a fast buffer. Now, let's actually talk about how good she actually is compared to other buffers. And I basically went and did some maths on how all of the different other buffers compare, and I can tell you right now, as far as damage like amplification goes for the entire team, if we assume that every single buffer is at Ascension 5 and they're all under the best possible scenarios where all of their conditional buffs are all functional and everything, then of course Mabayu is by far the best buffer, like a long way ahead of everyone else. And then after that, which are somewhat close together, is Ui, is Santa Sayaka, and is Tsuruno. So those three are then pretty close together in how much damage they actually provide to the entire team. So she basically slots in right next to those. Then a while after that is Mami, and then all the way at the bottom is Moemura, who doesn't actually provide that much to your team at all in terms of damage bonuses. So Mabayu is of course the absolute king. Then you have the midfield with Tsuruno, Ui, and Santa Sayaka now. Then it's Mami, then Moemura. So you just slot in pretty nicely, and she does actually seem pretty strong. However, and this is where we get to some of the downsides, keep in mind that some of her damage bonus comes from your team being at 3 SP or higher when you're using your damaging skill or your damaging special or whatever on whatever character you want to deal damage with, meaning that you need to keep your SP in mind for that. And without that damage bonus, her damage that she provides to the team drops a little bit. It's only a little bit, but it is a little bit still. And on top of that, her special has the stacking attack buff, which means that the very first time you use your special, it's actually not the most powerful special. You need to use it up to 3 times, and only then is it the most powerful special it could be. So you do still need to stack it up a little bit. So there's some things that you need to keep in mind that would drop her damage amplification that she gives to the team quite a bit. But the biggest downside, I would say, is the fact that she's limited. Now, usually that doesn't need to be problematic. For example, depending on what your ascensions are, you might not need to have high ascensions on that character for them to be great. So even if they are limited and you're not getting many ascensions, it might still be alright. But when it comes to buffers, the Ascension 4 passive for buffers is one of the most powerful effects in the entire game. And the fact that with this character being limited, it's really, really hard to actually gain access to that. That puts a really big dampener on Santa Sayaka. Now, if you do have Ascension 4 on Santa Sayaka, she is absolutely powerful. She's up there as one of the best buffers next to, for example, Ui and Mabayu, for example. And if you don't think about damage amplification, but generally how strong a buffer is overall, then she's also up there with Mabi Moimura. Like, she slots in really nicely among the best buffers. But like I said, that's only at Ascension 4, which is really difficult on a limited character, meaning that if you're free-to-play or you don't have that much money and you're asking yourself, should I invest into getting more Ascensions of that character? I'm not sure if that's really going to be the best choice, to be fair. That said, the bonus SP that she provides, the fact that even without Ascensions, she's still a very solid buffer that gives you just a good amount of buffs. And if you don't have other buffers that are already at Ascension 4 or higher, then I guess the comparison doesn't actually matter that much anyway. But in the future, of course, you will get those other buffers to Ascension 4 at some point, just because they're standard. But that won't really happen with Santa Sayaka. But even so, even if other buffers then go and outclass Santa Sayaka because they get Ascensions and she doesn't, then you can still use her as support Kyoku. So as support Kyoku, she's always going to be quite effective anyway, meaning that even if only right now you put her on the team and you know that she's going to get outclassed later, you can then just turn her into a support Kyoku, so she doesn't lose effectiveness on your team. It's just that she switches between what she does being on field to being support Kyoku. That's basically the entire idea. But yeah, the SP, I didn't talk too much about the SP. The SP is very strong, of course, to have, but that's not really something that is hard to put into words or into mathematics. Like, how mathematically stronger is your team if you get 2 extra SP sometimes? That's really not something that is very easy to judge, but I will say that it allows for, at least at the time of recording this, an infinite combo together with Hazuki, which I made a video about just before this. And the infinite combo is gonna get nerfed, I'm pretty certain, because it's an infinite combo. You can't just have that in the game like that. But yeah, that's at least maybe one other reason to specifically get Santa Sayaka, at least right now. But like I said, it's probably gonna get nerfed. So yeah, overall, very solid, good amount of different types of buffs. The speed buff that she provides is also not the greatest, to be honest. The speed buff is only like 10%, which even with Ascension 4 is only like 15%. But then you have, for example, Tsuruno, which provides 30% speed whenever someone breaks, which if there's ads, it's gonna be all the time anyway. So that would be like a 30% speed all the time, which, yeah, Tsuruno has a really strong speed buff if you keep that in mind. Mami, which A2 gets like 30% speed buff, or if she's at A4 or higher, is like 30% speed buff. Moemura, 45% speed buff. Mabayu gives people double turns, which is extremely fucking powerful. Ui gives 45% speed buff, all at A4 or higher, of course. And compared to that, even at A4 or higher, Santa Sayaka only gets 15% speed. That is a really low amount, so she doesn't actually help you get many turns, and that may be one other knock against her, that she doesn't really give you as many more turns or speed as much as other buffers do. But yeah, other than that, still very solid. Gives you many different things that you might need, and can then just swap into becoming a support later when she gets outclassed. So overall, very solid. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Subscribe button and ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, shout out to my members, Rip van Winkel, Chai Bean, and Simpletor. Thank you.